Everything that NBC News and the New York Times have told you about the war in Ukraine is a lie. The Russian army is incompetent, they claim. Ukraine is a democracy. Vladimir Putin is Hitler and he's trying to take over the world. Thankfully, the Ukrainians are winning. None of that is true. Every claim is false, the last one especially. The Ukrainian army is not winning. In fact, it's losing badly. Ukraine is being destroyed. Its population is being slaughtered in lopsided battles with a technologically superior enemy, or scattered by the millions to the rest of the globe as refugees. Ukraine is running out of soldiers. As that happens, the question will inevitably arise, who's going to replace them? If the Ukrainians can't beat Putin, who will? The answer, of course, will be us. American troops will fight the Russian army in Eastern Europe. That's most likely. And the assumption is we'll win. But will we win? Probably not, says former Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a decorated combat veteran who advised the Secretary of Defense in the last administration. The U.S., says Macgregor, is on the brink of a catastrophic war that could very easily destroy us. Few Americans seem to understand that, but they should. Doug Macgregor is now the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and we sat down with him recently. This conversation is worth hearing. Doug Macgregor, thanks for joining us. How would you assess and describe the state of the war in Ukraine right now?
That's an important question, and not enough people have good answers at this point. I think all of the lies that have been told for more than a year and a half about the Ukrainians are winning, the Ukrainian cause is just, the Russians are evil, the Russians are incompetent, all of that is collapsing. And it's collapsing because what's happening on the battlefield is horrific. The Ukrainians now, we think, have lost 400,000 men killed in battle. We were talking about 350,000 a few months ago. Within the last month of this supposed counteroffensive, which was to sweep the battlefield, they lost at least 40,000 killed. We don't even know how many people have been wounded, but we know that probably upwards of 40 to 50,000 soldiers are amputees. We know the hospitals are full. And we know that Ukrainian units at the platoon and company level, that's with anywhere from 50 to 150 to 200 men, are in piecemeal fashion surrendering to the Russians. Not because they don't want to fight, it's because they can't fight anymore. They have so many wounded, they can't evacuate them. And commanders are saying, well, if I can't evacuate my wounded, I'm going to surrender because otherwise the wounded will die. And so they call the Russians, and they all speak Russian, and tell them on the radio, look, I've got 50, 60 wounded here. I'm going to surrender because I don't want them to be killed. And the Russians from the very beginning have always treated the Ukrainian soldiers very fairly and very gently. And so they know they're not going to be abused or mistreated. They know they can actually be exchanged for Russian prisoners in the future. So they're surrendering. And I think we're going to see this army that we've been spending so heavily on increasingly melt away.
Today says it has intercepted a Ukrainian commando team seeking to conduct sabotage operations in Russia's Bryansk region. 2 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in a firefight and 5 were captured, including 3 who were injured. Something we've been asking ourselves on this show a lot is, how are Ukrainians talked into these missions, knowing their chance of success is so small? This is something that redacted correspondent Mike Jones, who is in Russia, has been speaking to members of the Ukrainian army about. He's been speaking to members who were captured, who are telling us their experience, and he joins us today to discuss this. So thanks for joining us. Maybe you can give us a little background about how you're seeking out these interviews and what you're learning.
Yes, I will clarify that I, as a British citizen, I'm not permitted to interview these prisoners. The interviews that I've gathered are actually through Maria Lelanova. She has her own Telegram channel, and she's the one that actually interviewed the prisoners. And being Russian speaking, it's obviously far more comfortable for her to do so. She was recently returned from her trip to Donbass and has provided me with these interviews. We've translated and subtitled them. You mentioned about this almost suicidal raid in Bryansk, just one of many that we've seen. And this was one of quite shocking revelations that she discovered in talking to one of these prisoners who wished to highlight the use of amphetamines in the Ukrainian army and its effect on people. He claims that these are issued free of charge. They are being paid for, presumably, by US tax dollars, or at least Western, collective Western countries' tax money. They are ordered to take these pills. They are in open packages, so there's no way of telling what exactly the substance is. They are ordered to take them, and then they proceed on their missions. He claims he is motivated to highlight this issue because of the amount of men that are dying as a result. He claims that they are ordered through minefields, because one of the effects of these amphetamines is you don't feel fear and you do not feel pain. So he said many of his comrades would be wounded, but they wouldn't notice. And with the loss of blood, the heart will just stop after about a minute and a half, he claims. So in the context of these, what seem to be suicidal missions and incursions into Russia, that kind of makes sense now, how these soldiers, in this case, this was a man simply returning from his dacha, and he was just given a summons and sent to the front line. Another complaint he had, that many people have only held an automatic rifle 4 times before they're being pushed into the front lines, effectively drugged up and sent on to these missions.
That's right. So let's listen to him say that, and then we'll come back.
Скажите, пожалуйста, как вас зовут?
Виктор Леонидович.
Сколько вам лет?
45.
Вы откуда?
Винница.
Из Винницы? А вы давно в плену?
2 месяца.
А сколько времени на фронте до этого провели?
Год и месяц.
Год и месяц?
Да.
Скажите, пожалуйста, вот я так понимаю, вы согласились рассказать о том, что есть такой момент, что украинские военные используют наркотические вещества.
Да.
Вот можете сказать, пожалуйста?
Ну, используется самое легкое, это конопля, то есть это...
Танки курить.
Да, это, ну как сказать, это как аспирин, образно. То есть это самое легкое.
Это относительно безвредно.
Да. Потом амфетамины какие-то давали, такие, что, ну, ты выпиваешь, тебе болевой эффект.
Выдавались в каком
Wall Street, a esta hora ha dimitido uno, pero va a dimitir el segundo ministro de Defensa en Europa. Y si no lo hace, le dimiten. Que ya saben, en todo caso, que en política dimitir no es una cosa que uno reflexione y diga, he decidido que por el bien de mi país, no. En política dimitir supone, y pierde toda reflexividad, que alguien llega y te dice, dimite. Y te dimiten. Efectivamente, eso le ha ocurrido en el día de hoy a Ben Wallace, al ministro de Defensa, al flamante ministro de Defensa de Reino Unido, al tipo que iba a liderar la OTAN. Lo peor es que le dimiten por agresivo. No tuvo sus estudios, se alistó en el ejército y desde ahí realizó cierto crecimiento dentro del Reino Unido, hasta terminar en política actualmente. Ben Wallace, que llegó a sonar para ser el primer ministro que sustituyese a Boris Johnson. Llegó Liz Truss, ya saben, la que duró menos que una lechuga al frente del Ejecutivo del Reino Unido, y no llegó Ben Wallace, que en ese momento, además, cuando le preguntaron que por qué no se iba a presentar, dijo, por motivos familiares. Y aquí viene la clave de por qué va a dimitir. Insisto, si no lo hace en las próximas horas, es porque lo hace ya directamente el lunes. Pero Dmytro Kuleba, el ministro de Exteriores de Ucrania, ya ha filtrado que el ministro de Defensa de Ucrania no va a seguir en el cargo la semana que viene. Y ojo, porque no se trata solo de un giro, ahora les vamos a contar, de un giro en la política de la OTAN, no. En el caso del el ministro de Defensa de Ucrania, hablamos de una vinculación por corrupción. Dentro de esa suerte de limpieza que está realizando Volodymyr Zelensky, hay ciertos vínculos que no le gustan dentro de su ministro de Defensa. Bueno, yo no sé si ni cuánto hay de real en esto, sobre todo, bueno, uno, porque ya saben que todo se convierte en propaganda cuando estalla una guerra como esta, pero dos, ¿cómo es posible que haya un vínculo de corrupción en alguien que pertenece y lleva el Ministerio de Defensa en un momento en un hito bélico, como es la defensa de Ucrania frente a Rusia?
1 de septiembre empieza esto con muchísimo movimiento, sobre todo de preocupación, que sería la clave fundamental después del agosto que hemos pasado, que nos deja, lo comentaremos luego, en una posición en la que la banca privada nos dice tenemos tanto que ganar como tanto que perder. El número es mágico, 7. 7% de rentabilidad en la bolsa europea hacia arriba, 7% hacia abajo. Pero no es la preocupación principal de unos mercados que viven en el mundo de Matrix. La preocupación principal se llama estanflación y se la veníamos contando desde hace más de un año, en el que le decíamos: el peor escenario no es una recesión, ojalá hubiera llegado ya. Ojalá hubiese puesto ya encima de la mesa la recesión, todos los problemas propios de una recesión. Ahora lo que se mira es el miedo a una estanflación.
Let's talk about Africa, and the dominoes of Western power are falling all over Africa this evening. The fourth Western-controlled African country is in the middle of a military coup to topple its corrupt Western-backed leaders. And other African nations are today purging their ranks for fear of coups sweeping through other countries in Africa. We'll get into that here in a moment. The country that we're talking about today, though, is Gabon in Western Africa, a neighbor of Congo. Here it is on the map, right there on the water, right there hugging the coast. France, of course, colonized Gabon in the late 19th century. It ruled until about 1960. And during that time, of course, France exploited Gabon's natural resources. After it stopped ruling, it still continued to pilfer its resources. They picked their own president to lead that country. He was a puppet of France since the 1960s. The family has been a puppet of the West since the 1960s. Gabon has been under one family leadership, which is still controlled by France as a neo-colonial puppet. And over the past 24 hours, a military coup has unfolded. President's family has been in power in Gabon for 55 years. Here is found just piles of cash, piles of US dollars and CFA francs and euros. Take a look at this. Payoff money. Suitcases. When I get my cash delivered, I like it to be in large duffel bags. Suitcases shipped right to my door. Keep doing our bidding. This was all found in his house. Where's his son? Oh, his son has been grabbed, arrested for treason. Treason for selling out the people of Gabon. Yeah, take our bribes, allow us to keep stealing your minerals, basically. That's exactly what this money is. It's blood money.
Tras 9 personas, como por ejemplo, 2 desconocidos, una hora antes de partir el vuelo, llegaron como compradores, porque ese avión estaba siendo vendido. Estuvo un mes en reparación y le hacía falta una pieza que saltaron y brincaron para conseguirla, un turbo refrigerador. Esos 2 desconocidos llegaron una hora antes y efectivamente observaron el tablero y se retiraron. Esas 2 personas pertenecían a la empresa Rusjet, que estaba interesada en la compra pues del Embraer Legacy. Examinaron el tablero durante un tiempo y se retiraron. Fueron traídos por el copiloto Rustam Karimov, que también estaba en la lista de los que fallecieron. Karimov tenía unos 2-3 meses trabajando con el empresario militar.